all I could talk about was SMU, and I just got shit on for months.
There's no SMU in this bracket.
Oh, yeah, there's an SMU in the next bracket. I guarantee there's an SMU in the next bracket.
At 11-1.
You gonna put 5?
I don't think that happens because they. What's that?
You gonna put 5 of SEC teams in? They can't all.
Welcome to college football.
The Big Bets on Campus podcast. All right,
here we go.
Welcome back to the new BCS as part of the Big Bets on Campus podcast. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, the other members of the new BCS, Brett McMurphy and Collin Wilson. By the way, if you're listening to the podcast version, the intro was done by our beloved caller, Martin, who was voicemail caller of the week. He said it was his dream to say "What's up, Degenerate Nation." That's what he asked for instead of gear. So he becomes the first person to say "What's up, Degenerate Nation" on this podcast besides yours truly. I am surprised. If you're new here, by the way, this is a weekly episode we do. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe and like button. We do early in the week, kind of talk high level, random topics, a little bit of a betting twist, but try to keep it pretty broad. Talking about just the landscape of college football playoff, futures, touch on some of the stuff that happened in the previous weekend. And I'm surprised that Collin showed up for this episode because my idea was let's do a mid-season updated college football playoff bracket.
Yes.
And before Collin can have a new graphic now to get rid of the old one. Before we get to the new ones, of course, we have to review the old ones. So we'll start. Let's start with we'll get to Collin last because that's the best. Let's start with Brett, and you can talk through like where you went wrong. And
I have some whiffs there.
Yeah, Brett's bracket, the quarterfinals, Oregon. There's some teams with the bye at Oregon, which looks pretty good. Alabama, not so sure about that. Miami, and then Utah. They're done. And then your first round matchups, LSU versus Penn State. That looks okay.
That's they should be good. LSU's questionable. Penn State should be a lock.
Ohio State, Texas State.
Yeah,
Texas
my
State.
Group 5 isn't going to happen.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it. Virginia Tech, Ole Miss.
No on Virginia Tech, and probably no on Ole Miss.
And then the one I gave you the most grief for, Georgia against Iowa. You trusted the old Hawkeyes.
I did.
Any overarching thoughts, comments?
The Group of 5, I was trying to go anti-Boise because that was the easy pick, and they seem in good position. We'll find out how they do Friday against UNLV.
You get. By the way, I don't. You're not like a big reply reader of your tweets.
No, Stuck. I don't reply to anybody. Collin's wife sent me a thank you, and I didn't see it. So, I've learned from breaking stories on Ohio State and other schools that the amount of responses I get, I can say what a beautiful sunny day it is, and you're going to get 100 responses saying, "Hey, asshole, it's raining here." So, yeah, I don't. Unfortunately,
I'll let you know that
I don't see my responses.
You could your bowl projections.
You could credit me. You could say, respond in 5 minutes. I'll give you $1 million. I will never see it. So if you've complimented me, I appreciate it. If you've criticized me, that's cool. But yeah, I don't read it. I just don't.
Well, I can tell you as someone who did check out I always look at your comments when you tweet out your bowl projection. Your updated bowl projections.
I could imagine. Yeah.
It's always Brett is the biggest Boise hater. Because you didn't have Boise in the beginning of the year, and now someone was talking about how you have a vendetta against Boise. Today.
Sure, yeah, I do.
You had Army in there over Boise.
Yeah.
So
if I put Boise in, I hate America because I don't like Army and Navy. Yeah, so it's whatever.
Brett, Boise hater McMurphy. All right, so we'll get to your updated one in. Actually, let's just go right to your updated one because then we can kind of compare and contrast what has changed. You did originally have Ohio State beating Georgia in the national title. So what is your updated? I guess we know it since you tweeted out, but do you want to tell us 1 through 12?
Yeah, Oregon, Georgia, Miami, Iowa State getting the buys, and then the large teams: Ohio State, Penn State, Texas, Clemson, LSU, A&M, BYU, and Army. Taking a second to look at those real quick, I would bump BYU out. I think they're going to lose too many games, and they will not be in a large team. Obviously, Army's they have to win the American. They need help with Boise losing and others, but I would still stick with Army. I think it's going to come down to Texas A&M's there. If they beat LSU, does that knock LSU out? And Texas A&M still has to play Texas. Notre Dame, only one loss. I think they lose to somebody. I don't know if they'll lose to the military academies. I know you're going to take them double digits. They still have to play at USC. Maybe that's around rally the troops game for Lincoln Riley. I don't think Indiana at 10-2 losing to. I think they'll lose to Sparty and also to Ohio State. I don't think 10-2 gets them in. So I feel confident about my at-large teams except for BYU. I think they filter out. The Big 12 only gets one team in there.
Well,
but
here's a couple.
There's so much chaos still ahead.
Oh yeah, I mean this is a very difficult endeavor. But Brett, let me ask you. You mentioned 10-2 Indiana. I mean 10-2 Indiana's out. Let's be honest. 11-1 Indiana. I'm not.
They have to be in.
I don't know. I'm not fully convinced they'd 100% be in. It depends on what other things that happen. But I mean, if Indiana goes 11-1, they don't go to the Big Ten title. They get blown out by Ohio State. What is their best win?
This is everyone's like, well, what's the selection committee going to do? Again, it's a different committee every year, but historically, the biggest thing that matters to them, we've said it before, is the number in the loss column. If Indiana is 11-1 and you're comparing them against a 9-3 team, I think they get in. Now, if it's a 10-2 team, then kind of what you brought up, strength of schedule and those sort of things. But ultimately, I don't think the committee will put, again, if it's coming down to the last spot, they may seed them, differently or whatever. But if we're saying, okay, the final at large spot is between 11-1 Indiana and give me 9-3 LSU, 9-3 A&M, 9-3 Clemson, whatever. I think Indiana gets the nod because of only one loss.
I would agree with that, but I think that there's going to be other 10-2. So
sure, yeah,
like that they're gonna end up falling to, and I'm not convinced that Indiana's not gonna go 10-2. But if they do finish 11-1, I mean, I think in regards to LSU, I think they're in over Indiana if LSU goes 10-2, which means they would just have to either beat Texas A&M or Alabama after their bye. And I also think the same is true for Texas A&M. If Texas A&M goes 10-2, I think they would be in over an 11-1 Indiana, which means Texas A&M either has to beat. I mean, they can't fall at South Carolina. That won't be an easy game. But they either have to beat LSU this week, or if they lose to LSU, I think the Texas game becomes a play-in for them. Because if they beat Texas, right, the last game of the year, and Indiana, who Indiana plays Purdue.
They could knock Texas out.
Yeah,
and one school we didn't mention is Alabama. I mean, everyone's putting dirt on their grave. If they went out 10-2, Alabama's in. But again, this is like we're drawing up plans. On the beach here, and the wave's going to hit us in about 5 days. we're looking at this, and there's going to be some crazy upsets that we're not looking at that's totally going to screw this up, which is what I love. But hey, this is why, they announced today, ABC had the first time since 1996, 2 games on the same day. College football had more than 10 million viewers. Bama, Tennessee, and Georgia, Texas. Ironically, that was also how many bottles were thrown on the field by Texas fans. But yes, this is going to be crazy, and trying to pick this stuff, draw names out of a hat, you'd probably have better success.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Alabama's still like even money to make it. Texas A&M plus 125, LSU plus 105, Indiana 2-1 odds to make the college football playoff. Here's a scenario that not a lot of people are talking about. I don't think I've heard anyone talk about this. So if Miami goes 12-0, they're in, obviously, right? Even if they lose the ACC championship, I think they're in. But there's a chance this ACC championship comes down to tiebreakers, and the tiebreaker will go to common opponents, and the ACC record, the tiebreaker, they don't play each other. Their record against common opponents would be the same, and it would go down to whoever's opponents in the ACC play have the worst league record gets left out. So it comes down to who you played in the ACC and what their records are in the ACC. It is as close as it can possibly be. If you take, because Clemson has a harder schedule coming up, Miami has an easier one. But if you just project on who they will play the rest of the year, and then look at their current ACC records, Clemson's opponents are 12-18 currently. Miami 11-18, SMU 11-19. I mean, it can flip on one game. Clemson getting NC State to beat Cal was actually pretty big because Clemson's the only team that plays NC State, and the other 2 teams play Cal, SMU and Miami, so they suffered a loss there. But so there's a chance that it's any of the combinations. I mean, if you want to talk about college football playoff bracket chaos, this tiebreaker could change on the final weekend. But it's 11-1 Miami that gets left out of the ACC championship game. So say they fall to, I mean, Miami could lose a shootout to anybody.
Sure.
Obviously not Florida State,
or Cal.
But how about Syracuse? I mean, Miami's going to score at will, but like we saw with the Cal game, or Georgia Tech if Haynes King is healthy. So there's 2 spots on their schedule on the road where they could drop a game. So 11-1 Miami that doesn't make the ACC championship, it would have 0 ranked wins. Are they definitely a lock? I don't know. It's worth pondering.
I'll say one last thing and then let Collin jump in. I think the one thing that we don't know, because it's never been a factor, is, and you brought up the perfect scenario in the ACC, how will the committee view a team that didn't make the championship game that may have the same record versus a team that lost in the championship game? Are they going to penalize the team of that trio, the team that loses in the championship, or are they going to reward them for making the championship and not count the loss against them? That's, again, it's a beauty pageant. Ask 10 people, get 10 different answers. So, I don't know. That's why this thing's so crazy. So, I don't know how you predict this, but I don't know what Collin thinks on that. But that's the one thing that we've never experienced this before, is having to evaluate teams that lost in the championship game against a team that didn't even play.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it in the past sometimes, right? Sorry to bring this up, Colin, but like Ohio State, TCU back in 24. Like, there's been times where with the old system that we had to evaluate that. And that's a fascinating question, is if Miami goes 11-1 and they don't make the ACC championship game, are they better off in that spot or going 11-1 and losing in the ACC
The
championship.
Clemson, yeah.
I have that team. It's another conference. What you're talking about is a team that I have in my playoff. Is I'm making their conference championship with one loss, and they're going to make it, and that's Kansas State. Kansas State is blocked by Colorado. They lost to Colorado in the standing in the Big 12. If Colorado wins out, Kansas State cannot make the championship.
Kansas State beat Colorado. You and these bracket shows.
Who they lose to? Where am I at?
Where
They
am I
lose
at?
to, I'm sorry, BYU. They're blocked by BYU. I'm sorry. I said the wrong team. Crap.
Edit that.
Can we edit that out?
No, do not edit that. You got to start off as
It was
bracket
BYU.
show.
Sorry, it was BYU. I looked up. I looked down.
Do you want to go on with your thought, or are you done?
I don't think Kansas State is going to make the Big 12 championship, and I still think that they're going to make the playoff. I don't know if we want to pivot to my bracket, but I just said who's going to win out. Right? I'll stop wherever you want to go.
All right. Well, before we get to yours, we'll do mine. So I think mine looks pretty good as of right now, which means you guys are probably due to have good stuff happen to yours and me bad. I had Ohio State as the 1, Georgia as the 2, Clemson as the 3, Iowa State as the 4. I'm not changing any of those. In my updated bracket, my 5 seed is Oregon, keeping that the same. 6 seed is Texas, keeping that the same. My 7 seed is Penn State. I'm keeping that the same. My 8 seed is Alabama. Getting them out of there. 9 seed is Texas A&M. I'm keeping A&M in my bracket. 10 seed is Notre Dame. I'm keeping Notre Dame in my bracket. And then this is where mine got bad. I had Utah as the 11 seed. That's not happening. And then I have Memphis as my at-large, which is still possible. But I'm going to go with Boise State. I think even if Army wins the AAC, just the strength of schedule is ultimately going to keep Boise ahead of them if Boise runs the table and wins the Mountain West. And I'm also going to have, so my updated one is Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, Iowa State, the same as before. Texas, Oregon, Penn State, Notre Dame. I'm going to have Miami in there. But there's scenarios where I can see them not getting in. And then I'm keeping Texas A&M, flipping Memphis for Boise in the 11, and then I'm flipping Alabama for LSU. Because I think LSU either beats Texas A&M or Alabama. I think they beat Alabama and knocked Alabama out. And I think 10-2 would be good enough to get in. So that's my updated bracket. 10 or 11 still possible. But Memphis and Utah, pretty big long shots. All right, let's get to the star of the show, Collin Wilson, and his bracket. Starts off pretty strong, Collin. 1 seed Georgia, 2 seed Oregon, 3 seed Clemson, and now we fall off. 4 seed UCF,
Can still have it.
bye. 5 seed Alabama, 6 seed Florida State.
Yeah, it's bad.
1 win Florida State. 7 seed Ole Miss,
Not happening.
8 seed Notre Dame, 9 seed Penn State. You're okay there.
Yeah.
Got a nice little pocket there. 10 seed Utah, 11 seed Ohio State, 12 seed App State.
Eee. Ooh. They've missed 170 tackles since I made that up.
So Collin's teams that have no chance of making it: Utah, UCF, App State, Florida State. Collin, any thoughts?
The Florida State was purely a move on fading Miami. Cal game didn't give me any belief that Miami can do it. Utah, just based on prior history and Cam Rising being healthy. We see how that
fade Miami. What about the other 11 games that Florida State plays?
Yeah, Florida. I had to pick somebody. See, here's the deal. You know what the problem is with this bracket is that I took so much shit for 3 months. So much shit from you, from Twitter, from everybody in this world about SMU. All I could talk about was SMU, and I just got shit on for months.
There's no SMU in this bracket.
Oh, yeah, there's an SMU in the next bracket. I guarantee there's an SMU in the next bracket, all right? So I tell you what, the Florida State is bad, all right? It's really bad. We're going to get a pass on that. App State was the fact that I didn't believe in the Malachi Nelson kid at Boise. Didn't matter. They're a train. So anyways, the Utah thing, did any of us see that coming? Probably not.
No, nobody saw that.
You're right. And my semifinals are still Georgia over Alabama and Oregon over Clemson. I mean, the semis weren't bad. It's just this first round stuff I really with a little bit with a couple of these teams.
Well, and the second round with UCF.
Yeah, the UCF thing didn't turn out too well. But you know what? 3 weeks ago, I thought it was pretty good. And then everybody quit. And now there's a bunch of freshmen playing. I don't know what the hell's going on down there in Orlando.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't believe in Miami, but you believed in SMU. Florida State plays them both, and you went with Florida State.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we just joke. It's all in good fun. These are impossible to pick before the season, and it's good to take chances. I think it's going to be wild. It's a lot more wild than I thought it was going to be, and how it's going to play out. So, Collin,
yeah,
it's time for redemption. It's time for you to unveil your updated midseason top 12.
Well, there's no change at 3 of my top 4 seeds. Oregon number 1, Georgia number 2, Clemson number 3. Number 4 seed is going to be Iowa State. We even like them in our Big 12 pod. I split the bet between UCF and Iowa State, so there's no surprise there. My 5 seed is going to be Penn State. I am already handicapping the Ohio State game, and I got a pretty good feeling I am pro Andy Kotelnicki over Chip Kelly.
All right, now here's the big one. Who are we swapping Florida State out for in your cursed 6 seed?
I can't even tell you how my number 6 Texas. I'm so sweaty and nervous about them playing Texas A&M at the end of the year. I'm potentially thinking I know that I'm going to have a bet on Texas A&M in that game, and that could be it for Texas because we're talking about 2 lost teams that don't go to the conference championship game. That would be it for Texas, but I have them at number 6. At number 7, I have Miami. Now we have a real problem here. The ACC potentially is going to have 3 undefeated teams. So I got Miami at 7. I don't see them losing here. I got Notre Dame at 8, and that's if they survive Navy. If they survive Navy, I got no problem with USC coming up here in a few weeks. So if Notre Dame has to be in there as a 1-loss team, I'd argue as a 2-loss team, they might get more benefit of the doubt than others with the committee. I mean, think about the committee. We're not dealing with a computer here. We're dealing with a bunch of people that look at 0, 1, and 2 as losses. And Notre Dame has prestige from legacies ago. Number 9, I don't care if anybody likes this. It's happening. SMU is going to the playoff. I know it's plus 150. Who's beating them on this schedule? Look at this schedule. They're not playing Clemson. They're not playing Miami. The schedule's a joke. And then, I said, who do I think is going to win out? I think Kansas State is going to win out. Absolutely. Look at who they play. Now, I misspoke earlier. They lost to BYU. BYU has to lose twice for Kansas State to get in the championship game. BYU's not going to lose twice with this schedule. Utah, no. Kansas, no. Arizona State, no. Houston, no. Like they might lose 2, maybe. Probably not with that schedule remaining. So Kansas State can't get in. And if Kansas State get in and they sweep their schedule, have you seen the Kansas State schedule, by the way? It's pretty easy. So they're potentially not going to go to the Big 12 championship game, sweep the rest of this schedule, and they have to be in because they will have only 1 loss next to their name. So,
I disagree with that. I mean, Kansas State's best win would be
Iowa State at the end of the year.
Colorado?
Iowa State at the end of the year.
At Iowa State.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, if they win that game.
Right. And then
they would get in over Iowa State into the Big 12 championship.
Not if they face each other in the Big 12 champ. Iowa State can still go to the Big 12 championship game.
Not if they lose to Kansas State. Then Kansas State will have the tiebreaker.
Well, we don't know what BYU is going to do, though, either.
Yeah,
right?
if BYU drops a
So
couple.
what, are you going to knock Iowa State out with 1 loss? If Kansas State goes, then the same rule applies to Iowa State.
I don't think Iowa State's getting in with an at-large.
With one loss. You don't think Kansas State or Iowa? I think if both of them have one loss, they're in. One could sit out and one could win the championship.
I don't think so. I think there's going to be
this committee. Listen,
but you got to remember it's the committee. It's not the Big 12 committee.
No, but
at the end of the day, they're going to default to SEC teams that are when it's like a head-to-head. When it's like Iowa State with one loss versus a 10-2 Texas A&M that just beat Texas, you're taking A&M. If it's 10-2 LSU versus 11-1 Kansas State, you're taking LSU.
I'll let Brett.
I just think that's how it's gonna go.
I don't think so. I think there is a narrative out there that SEC is down. They're not as good as the Big Ten. There's been play within the league in SEC that proves that they're not as good as they've been in the past. So
I think you're underestimating.
All right, I got one.
It just means more. But you got one more?
Yeah, I'm just okay. So these are teams that I think are going to win out, and that team is Indiana. Listen, Curtis Rourke, who we've talked about on this show, he's going to come back for Ohio State. He will be there for Ohio State. The game before they play Michigan, they haven't beaten Michigan in the entire Joe Biden presidency. Right? That Ohio State-Michigan game is monstrous. They don't care about Indiana. And I didn't have Ohio State making the playoff. Like, I bet them to miss the playoff. I've got Indiana at 11. And I'm saying this, 9 SMU, 10 Kansas State, 11 Indiana. I think all three of them can win out.
This is a wild. I thought you were going to come. This bracket's even more wild than your first one. How many SEC teams do you have in? 2?
2. I have Georgia and Texas.
No way.
How many 3-loss teams are there going to be? Okay,
there's going to be 2-loss teams.
They're not going to take a 2-loss.
I'll buy you a boat if there's only 2 SEC teams.
If Tennessee gets beat by 40.
Put that on the record. If there's
what kind of boat? Teams, what kind of boat?
A dinghy.
If Tennessee gets beat by 40 by Georgia, they would take Kansas State in with 1 loss.
No. 2 SEC teams, not in a million. There's a better chance there's 6 than 2.
Listen,
I think they're going to get 4.
If you want me to swap Indiana or Kansas State out with a Tennessee, I would.
The bracket is the bracket.
Okay, the bracket. I am playing on the fact that I think SMU, Kansas State, and Indiana can win out, and with 1 loss or 0 losses.
So if we include Notre Dame as an ACC team, you're saying there's going to be 4 ACC teams and 2 SEC teams.
SMU's in,
and multiple Big 12 teams. The same amount of Big 12 as the SEC.
I mean, look, I love my SEC. I love my SEC.
I love this. This couldn't have gone any better.
And then
just edit our entire podcast down to the last 30 seconds, and that's all we need. Forget the other 30 minutes.
SMU, Kansas State, and Indiana. They're taking the rest of the schedule.
You'll be the genius of the year, or
SMU, Kansas State, Indiana.
That's 9.
Don't read your Twitter mentions.
Boise. And listen, we'll talk about this on the pod on Thursday. Boise dominated the Go-Go in the Mountain West Championship. Nothing's changed on the Boise defensive side of the ball. Haj Malik Williams, you think that he's that great at quarterback? Boise's already dominated John Mateer. I think John Mateer ran backwards the entire game. So I'm not worried about Boise and with UNLV. So I got Boise at number 12.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think UNLV's sweeping Boise. So even if Boise loses this game, that'll make it like the rankings more interesting though. Like, I think if they run the table, they're going to get in. I mean, they're going to be the highest ranked Group of 5 champ, but it should be interesting. Man.
So what's the stance? The stance here from Stuck is that 2-loss SEC teams are absolutely getting in over 1-loss ACC and Big 12 teams. Is that the stance?
Enough of them will. Yeah, they'll take a couple for sure. So when I looked, we didn't even mention like Ole Miss could run the table. I don't think they will, but if they run the table and they have a win over Georgia, if Ole Miss goes 10-2, and they have a win over Georgia late in the season, I think they're getting in. Now, I didn't have them in because I think they lose to Georgia, but I think LSU and Texas A&M have a good shot of finishing 10-2. I think if either finishes 10-2, they're in. I also think, if Alabama runs a table 10-2, they're in. I don't think they do. If Tennessee runs a table and goes 10-2, I'm sorry, if Tennessee only has one more loss Tennessee runs the table. They're in, by the way, at 11-1.
You gonna put 5?
I don't think that happens because they. What's that?
You gonna put 5 of SEC teams in? They can't all.
Welcome to college football. Is it for your first time here? Tennessee. So if Tennessee only has 2 losses, probably in. They're minus 180 to make it, and so they lose at Georgia.
You can put a team in that lost to Arkansas.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean Tennessee. Here's Tennessee's schedule. Say they lose to Georgia, and that's their second loss. Kentucky at home, Mississippi State at home, UTEP at home, at Vandy. Do you know what my narrative is for my bracket? The reason I didn't have Tennessee in? What's been the main... I think Tennessee's deeply flawed. What's been the main storyline?
They'll lose.
One of the main storylines of this season? Diego Pavia. Diego Pavia upsets Tennessee in Nashville to end the season and knock Tennessee out. That's what's going to have to happen. I mean, maybe Kentucky's capable on a good day. I mean, we saw them win at Ole Miss. But Tennessee probably wins that game. They have Mississippi State at home, UTEP at home. They're winning those games. Say they lose to Georgia at Georgia. I think that's a fair assumption. Season playoff could come down to Pavia at the end of the year. Pavia also has a chance to knock out Texas, potentially. Yep. I mean, I think Texas, there's another team. Texas gets in at 10-2. So if they lose at Vandy, they have Florida at home, at Arkansas, home against Kentucky. Could come down to that A&M game. That could be a playing game. But, all right, the Collin Wilson bracket. We'll get a graphic made up. I respect your boldness. After being extremely bold in the preseason, you didn't come in here with a bunch of chalk. You went with the Big 12 and ACC Invitational. All right.
I'm not doubting Signetti, ever. Put him in.
All right. So, a couple. By the way, if you don't listen to our, and I know most of you do, if not all, that are listening to this, our end of the week preview. I'm going to do this weekly. People seem to like it last week. I'll go through all of the quarterback injuries to monitor for the weekend. Couple worth noting: Indiana, obviously, Rourke is out this week ahead of their game against Washington. Garrett Green got hurt for West Virginia. He might not be able to go. They might bench him. Who's their backup? Maricol? I forget. Mm-hmm. Is that Maricol?
They also lost running back and their left tackle to concussions. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Was not a great weekend for the Ears. Nevada, I know Brendan Lewis is questionable on the island. And there's a ton. I mean, the MAC is just littered with quarterback injuries. So there's a couple to note. Colin, do you have any that you wanted to?
Yeah, Keon Jenkins is going to play for FIU tomorrow night when they take on Sam Houston. But Sam Houston, we're not going to know about Hunter Watson until right before kick. So, and if you are unfamiliar with these teams, Hunter Watson is the most important player on Sam Houston. Leads in rushing yards. He's the quarterback, passing, everything. So keep your eyes on that. That's the reason you saw some FIU movement today in the market. I believe down to 5.5, but I expect if Hunter Watson is announced in, you'll see that pop right back up. So I would keep that in mind for Tuesday night Conference USA action.
For
Jaquindon Jackson, I know it's not quarterback related. I don't think Jaquindon Jackson's going to play against Mississippi State. So if you're a prop player out there, it could be Talon Green deep to Armstrong and Satania against Mississippi State. There should be 100 possessions in this game with the pace that Levy goes. So
that number seems a bit too high, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it
does. Yeah.
How about futures? Futures worth betting. The ones that stuck out for me ahead of this weekend, I think they have 2 shots. Mm-hmm. And I already talked about this team. I think LSU to make the playoff at plus money is worth a bet. I like them against Alabama. They certainly have a shot against Texas A&M this week. Then they have Florida, home against Vandy, home against Oklahoma to end the year. I think if they just win one of their next 2, they're in. And so assuming they don't get upset down the line. Colin, any futures worth looking into?
Yeah, I wrote a huge piece should be on action here middle of this week. It's It's going to be your college football midseason futures assessment. I went through every conference and talked about some of our favorite conference tickets that we made during the summer. But more importantly, who should we be looking at right now? Like last week, this
did you even include the SEC in this article?
I did. Let me just. I believe I put Texas in there, so we'll save that for the readers.
One bid SEC.
Yeah,
SEC just the winner of the SEC championship gets in, and that's it.
It's looking pretty grim. So on this podcast last week, we talked about Colorado State. There is still a path for them. Their offense has changed. Their top 50 in success rate for rushing. So I still like Colorado State at the number of 18-1. But the one I want to get your take on, Buffalo. Like Buffalo really stuck out to me. I know there's been like a kind of a love-hate relationship with these guys, but their loss to Western Michigan, if you go into the box score is like completely fraud. Like the Bulls average 8.1 yards per play and the Broncos had just 6.9. There's some scheduling things here that kind of work to their advantage. The second half of their max schedule is the easiest in the country. Akron, Ball State, Kent State, they're all slated in November. I mean, I'm not sure if I have a lot of love for this team in general, but the schedule is extremely easy. It's a box score fraud against Western Michigan, who's supposed to be the class of the MAC. I think Buffalo at 11-1 has a really good shot in the MAC.
I mean, yeah, the MAC is so wide open. It'll come down to at Ohio, at Eastern Michigan. But they have Kent State. They're at Akron. Western Michigan has a tougher schedule coming up. Western Michigan's, CJ Agbon has played much better than I thought for Buffalo. I had Western Michigan in that game. It was Western Michigan was up like, I think 20 at one point, but you're right. Buffalo had a couple special teams mistakes, very un-limbo like. They couldn't field a kickoff. They were like, they couldn't deal with the sun. They kept muffing the kickoffs, but there was a spot. That game was so insane. As someone who had Western Michigan in that game, Western Michigan goes for it on fourth down at their own 30 with 40 seconds left. And Buffalo had no timeouts, down 7. They called a time, but Western Michigan called a timeout. I was like, are they going to go for this? I was like, their offensive line is really good. They didn't sneak it, just sneak it. But they ran with their triple wing formation. They ran to the right. I was convinced they were stopped. Buffalo was convinced they stopped them. The Western Michigan sideline was in shock. Buffalo is celebrating. Helmets off. I was like, I'm going to lose this bet. And then they were like, we're going to measure it. I don't know how, but the ball was this much, literally this much on the first down. It was crazy. I tried to find a highlight to tweet out. I can't find any highlights on YouTube. I can't find any highlights of the game on Twitter. No, nothing. The only things I could find on YouTube are sims. There's like 20 sims on college football playoff of the game before it happened. I'm like, this is ridiculous.
They took away our ability to clip clips out there of ESPN Plus. So I got one more.
Stuck. I watched that also. Sorry, I watched that also, and yeah, he was short. I was pulling for Western also, but yeah, he was short. I was
shocked they didn't look at it.
Yeah, it was obviously was short, but
I got one.
Tough luck if you're on the Bulls.
One more in the futures department. I'll let everybody go read about it. Colorado is entering week 9 with the easiest remaining schedule of any team in the Big 12. BYU, if you look at who they go to, Bryce Eccles, Bounce House, Sun Devil Stadium, that's some of their road trips. But if you look at what Colorado has to play, I'm not sure Arrowhead is really an away game against Kansas. Texas Tech, I mean, this is their toughest matchup going on here. Only one team holds a tiebreaker over Colorado, and that's Kansas State. So, Colorado has the easiest schedule by remaining strength of schedule per resume SP Plus. So I can't say I'm comfortable with it, but they're 12-1 right now to win the Big 12, and I can see them making the championship game with their remaining schedule.
Brett, any futures or Heisman commentary? I know that right now it's basically Ward and Genty are neck and neck at the top. And then you have Gabriel. Then it's a pretty big drop off. You got Travis Hunter. It's hard. See, you were all in on Travis Hunter.
Yeah, I think everyone's counting him out. I mean, if he returns and has some big games, I think he can climb back in there because he's not dependent on his team winning out. And going by what Collin says, if they do win out and he can get back on the field, he doesn't have to have the monster stat games. His stats are he plays every game. And he's going to get the narrative doing something that nobody's ever done before. He's obviously more of a long shot because of the injury. But you could say, well, they rested him the second half because the game was out of reach. Ultimately, though, he's got to play the rest of the season. I think you have tremendous value there. I think Dylan Gabriel could kind of, come up on the outside there if Oregon runs a table, especially if they beat, Indiana, according to Collin, in the Big Ten title game, and they're undefeated. I think he would have a very good opportunity there, which I know, kind of going off track. What in the world's OU thinking that they got rid of Dylan Gabriel and now they've gone through two quarterbacks trying to replace him and, fire Seth Luttrell, the offensive coordinator. But Stuck, the only future I'm going to parlay Indiana, SMU, and Kansas State to make the playoff based on Collin's recommendation. And if I win it next year, this will be the CS podcast because I will be retired living in the south of France with my millions of dollars.
Let's put that in right now. Let's see. Let me log in here. All right, so Collin, what is your read your bracket again? Start to finish.
All right, number 1 Oregon, number 2 Georgia, number 3 Clemson, number 4.
Actually, no, we can only parlay 9.
Okay.
So we'll skip Oregon, Georgia. Do you have Texas in?
Yeah, number 6.
Okay. So those are the 3 best odds. We'll parlay the rest. What do you got?
All right. We'll do Texas, Miami, Notre Dame, SMU.
Hold on, I got to scroll for SMU. Okay.
Kansas, that was a good one. Kansas State.
Okay.
Indiana. Boise State.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're still missing a couple. You have Clemson in?
Penn State. They were my number 5.
Okay.
And then
you have Ohio State in?
No, hell no. Iowa State's my number 4.
Iowa State. All right, we're missing one more.
That should be 9 teams, but we'll.
Okay. Wait, you don't have Ohio State?
No.
Okay, you have Oregon, Georgia, Texas, Penn State, Miami, Notre Dame, Iowa State, Boise State, Kansas State, Indiana, SMU. I'm still missing one.
Notre Dame?
I have Notre Dame. Will you read the teams to me one more time?
Oregon, Georgia,
content.
Oregon, Georgia, Clemson, Iowa State, Penn State. Texas.
I got Clemson. Okay. Here it is. I mean, it's not that crazy. 100 gets you 40,000 on a 19 parlay. I mean, like,
we're going to be able to get a bigger boat.
Indiana's two. I mean, Indiana's 2-1. SMU's plus 250. So there's no crazy odds in here. I just think that you have no chance because you're not gonna only have 2 SEC teams and no Ohio State.
No Ohio State. That bet was made back in June.
Unbelievable.
Hey, they still have to beat Michigan. They have to beat Indiana.
Michigan.
Penn State.
They have to beat Michigan. Have you seen Michigan? Have you watched Michigan attempt to play football this year? They're going to be 24-point favorites in that.
When's the last time Ohio State won this game? The Trump era, like Obama was president. When's the last time Ohio State won this game?
Nixon was president. Stuck. I'll buy you
a yacht if Michigan beats.
There's no way I'm betting Michigan in that game. By the way,
we'll split it 3 ways.
Yeah. All right. It's time for Source of Stumper. Brett, you got trivia for us this week?
Yep, I do. Source of Stumper, America's favorite game show. Current leaderboard: Stuckey, 18 points. Collin, 12 points. 4 questions this week. Very simple. Who has the better coaching record of these coaches that I am about to present to you. In the last 14 games, who has a better record between Clark Lee, Billy Napier, or Lincoln Riley? Or give me the name of the coach, or all three have the same record. And if you want to guess,
how are we doing this like structurally?
One of you guys can get. You can have the same guess, and then
We'll do it at the same time.
No, you don't. You can have the same guess. Collin, you can go first.
So, Clark Lee,
Billy Napier, and Lincoln Riley, their records in their last 14 games. Or is it is one of the coaches ahead, or is it a three-way tie? And if for a bonus point, if you guys can guess the record. 14 games.
I'll guess Clark Lee has the better record because I know Vanderbilt shows up the last couple of weeks of November. They always do.
How many wins for Clark Lee in 14 games?
7.
Okay, Stuck. What are you going with?
I don't think it's Clark Lee. I mean, Vandy always shows up in November, Colin. Like, what do they have? 1 November win in the last 5 years? There's no. I don't think it's Clark Lee. Florida faded down the stretch last year. God, USC's been struggling lately. I think like Lincoln Riley is like 500 overall at USC. And what are they this year? What is USC this year? They lost to Penn State, Maryland. They've lost 3 straight. They lost to Michigan too. Are they 3-4? Is that right? Yeah, USC's 3-4. So last year, does this include bowl games?
Their last 14 games.
Okay, so they won the bowl. That would put them at 4-4.
Collin's going to get a bonus point because the shot clock didn't expire.
I think it's Billy Napier, and I think that was my initial thought because of the way that you asked it, because it's Billy Napier. So I think USC faded down the stretch. So
how many wins for your guess?
I'm going to say 6.
The last 14 games: Clark Lee 5-9, Lincoln Riley 5-9. Sunbelt Billy 6-8. Stuck 2-pointer. Collin, you get a point because you didn't take all day. It's now 20-13. Okay.
By the way, Vanderbilt won 2 November games in 2022.
Yeah,
always show up.
They ended last year on like an 8-game losing streak. Okay, 2 coaches. Stuck, you can go first. You can guess the same if you want. 2 coaches. Who has the better record, or are they tied? Last 14 games, Hugh Freeze and Mark Stoops.
Oh, that's a good one.
How many?
Last 14. Stuckey, you're up.
I'll be... I mean, man, they've had some... I'm going to say Stoops, and then my reasoning...
What's his record?
Last 14 games, I'll say 6-8.
Okay.
Actually, no, I'm going to say 5-9. And, man, I mean, Hugh Freeze, Auburn's lost so many heartbreakers. They also lost their bowl game. They lost their heartbreaker to Alabama, to Oklahoma, to Missouri. I can't even think of many wins that Auburn's had. They lost to New Mexico State. So I'm going to say Stoops.
Okay. Collin, what's your guess?
It's really hard to go with Hugh Freeze, considering he lost to New Mexico State. It cost me my win total. I'll go with Stoops, and I'll say 5.
You both get half a point. Last 14 games, Hugh Freeze 5-9, Mark Stoops 5-9. Identical records. Just
Stoops
means more.
5-9. Wow. I mean, I that's what I said. But that's stunning to hear.
So basically, in the last 14 games, Billy Napier has a better record than Lincoln Riley, Hugh Freeze, and Mark Stoops.
And a way harder schedule.
Crazy.
Okay, here we go. This is the last 23 games. Alphabetical order.
Jesus.
This one's a little bit different. Either one person has more wins, or 2 of the 3 I'm about to give you are tied. Okay? Last 23 games as a head coach. Alphabetical order. Curt Cignetti, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart. Collin, you're up.
Well, there's 2 for him. There's more for him. All right, so I think I know who's best. What was the question? Out of the 23 games, who has the best record?
Yeah, or are two of the 3 tied? Either way.
I think 2 of the 3 are tied.
Okay, so which 2?
Saban and Smart with 2 losses.
With 2 losses. Okay, Stuckey, what's your guess?
I'm going to say Smart and Cignetti are tied.
What's their record?
Oh, shit.
21-2.
I forgot that Nick didn't have games.
Last 23 games. Nick Saban 19-4. Curt Cignetti 21-2. Kirby Smart 21-2. Stuck with the winner. Collin, you get half a point though. Curt Cignetti. Google him. He's got the same record as Kirby in the last 23 games.
Lost to App State and Air Force.
Yep.
In the bowl.
And the last question, we'll make it a quick one. Give me the coach with the most wins, or tell me if it is a tie. 3 coaches, last 13 games, alphabetical order. Mike Gundy, Mike Norvell, Brent Venables.
Last how many?
Stuckey, you're up. Last 13.
Who has the most, you're saying?
Yeah.
Is this a tie thing?
Or a tie, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm double thinking this, but you're a poke, so I'm gonna go Gundy.
How many wins?
What are they this year? Are they
DOA 3-4?
Well, you didn't have to help me with that, but they closed the year strong last year. I'm gonna say last 13. What did they do in their bowl? I think they won their bowl. All right. I'll say 3-4 this year. So 6. I'll say 4-2. I'll say 7-6.
Okay. Collin, what are you going with?
I thought Oklahoma got hot at the end of last year, so I'm going to go Oklahoma 8-5.
8-5. Okay. Last 13 games: Mike Gundy 7-6, Mike Norvell 7-6, Brent Venables 7-6.
Wow.
So Stuck, you get a point, but three-way tie there. So it's kind of funny. You look at all these numbers and the narratives on a lot of coaches are they are really good or really bad, and then you look at the numbers and it's become the NFL. Everybody's 500 except for Kirk Signetti and Kirby Smart.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Updated scoreboard?
It's Stuck 24.5 points. Collin 14 points. But if Indiana, SMU, and Kansas State make the playoff, that's worth 100 points. So still got a shot.
Agreed. All right. Time for one more for the road. Weekday Conference USA slop continues. It's not pretty. Collin, you already mentioned. Do you have any plays yet?
Yeah. I was going to pull them up right now. Florida International, I took it 7.5. Looks like it's come down to 5.5. It's all based on Hunter Watson. Got to find out if he's going to play for Sam Houston. I also took an under 47 in that game, but that is also based on Hunter Watson playing in that game. You can expect to see that total drop if he's not. And then for UTEP and La Tech, under 51 was the play that I logged on open. Looks like we're down to 50 and a 49.5 is on the board. UTEP is 129th in offensive finishing drives. I don't expect them to establish the rush against Louisiana Tech's D. And Louisiana Tech, 111th in offensive momentum killer. That means they have too many penalties. They miss too many field goals. They just cannot get out of their own way. So I took an under with La Tech and UTEP on Tuesday night.
I lean La Tech at under 7, which is where we are now. They made a change at play caller. I think it's served them well on offense, but I got to dig into these games. I mean, some of these, Liberty at Kennesaw.
Do you know
Jacksonville State hosting Middle?
That's the game right there I want to talk to you about. Do you know what what number is so bad on the board? Liberty and Kennesaw. Like it should be like 15 or 16. And I bought it. I put a little bit of money, not much. I don't know if I could do this to myself after Kennesaw scored 5 points and covered Middle Tennessee last week. But the number's ridiculous. And Liberty, by the way, go and look at Liberty. They haven't beat anybody by 24 points. I don't know what's going on with Jamie Chadwell and the Flames.
I'm not betting Kennesaw.
Come on.
No.
Collin,
probably inflated. But, I mean, Kennesaw, they covered for you last week. They needed a safety to cover.
Well, they only scored a touchdown. They got stopped at the 1, and then they got a safety.
I would lean Kennesaw. But, ugh. Brett, you don't have anything on this Conference USA slop, do you?
I do. And then real quick on Liberty, this will only be their second game in like 31 or 32 days.
32 days. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so take that for what it's worth. I'm actually looking at, it's not smart to lay a big number, but nobody ever accused me of being smart. The Gamecocks, Jacksonville State, playing Middle Tennessee, laying 21. Last 3 games, Jacksonville State's got their offense humming, albeit against Southern Miss. By the way, we called the Will Hall firing a few weeks ago. Kennesaw State and New Mexico State, but they are averaging over 50 last 3. Middle Tennessee is pedestrian on offense, and that's probably detrimental to pedestrian. So at Jacksonville State at home, they're rolling. Rich Rod will not take his foot off the brake. Go Gamecocks.
And they've had extra rest.
Yes, they have.
The Middle Tennessee State defense is a sight to behold. That's what gives me pause about Kennesaw. Like, the fact that they couldn't score against Middle Tennessee. They only scored like, 5 points.
Mandy's like, are you making me watch this in bed? And I was like, yes, I'm so sorry. It's so bad. 5 points.
Yeah, Middle Tennessee gave up 48 to Louisiana Tech.
And it could have been like 80.
Yeah.
Their defense is really bad. They got like quarterbacks playing safety and stuff. It's bad.
Yeah. That's a shit show for Derek Mason.
I'll give one out for Friday. BC at 7 or better. BC is, you get a couple little extra rest. Louisville season's over. Like, this is a team that had college football playoff aspirations, and now they have 3 losses. they're done. So, and this is a brutal spot. You lose that heartbreaker to Miami. Short week on the road at BC. You got Clemson on deck. And this line it just seems out of whack to me. BC is better than Virginia, in my opinion. BC was favored. Didn't BC close as a favorite at Virginia?
No, they were +2. BC
But I think they took money late because
Really? Okay.
Castellanos got ruled in. I don't know. Regardless, Louisville was a 7-point favorite at Virginia. I have BC better than Virginia. Throw in the spot, and I think it's BC here at 7 or better.
Yeah,
We'll talk more about that game later in the week. You got something?
Did you got any feelers on UNLV Boise before we go? That game is.
I want to break that game down, like in depth, but I can tell you from Boise's gonna have a ton of fans there, which is like something worth noting. It's not gonna be like a crazy UNLV home field. I mean, they played there last year too. The spot, I think, is pretty good for Boise because they had the bye, and UNLV is just like they play that Syracuse game in overtime. They're on the field for 90 plays. They go to altitude at Utah State. They're on the field for 90 plays. They go up playing physical Oregon State team in Corvallis. Game goes down to the very last play. So
interference on the last play.
Their defense might be. What's that?
Interference on the last play wasn't called.
Unreal. The one game in the NFL or college all year where the last drive went my way. LSU. Thank you, Tigers.
By the way,
good.
As a side note, the Rebel Roller has been retired. The UNLV SID told me, cash your tickets at Mountain West Media Days, that the NCAA had a problem with the Rebel Roller on the sidelines that is now sitting in a warehouse at Allegiant Stadium. I would kill to get that thing at an auction in this house. I would love to have the Rebel Roller.
That would be amazing. But thanks for joining me, Colin and Brett, as always. Thanks to our producers on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe on YouTube button. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Tell a friend, tell an enemy, know the deal. 5-star reviews, help us out. Thanks for listening again. Group of 5 guys back midweek. Colin and I back later in the week. Live show with Brett, Colin, myself, Mike Calabrese, Saturday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. As always, 85959 bad beat for the voicemail. Catch y'all later. Cheers.